I'm delighted to be presenting today with my colleagues from Korea, Japan and Hong Kong, who are outstanding partners in our Asian region. This is the first time I've been to South Africa, and thank you to Ken and his organising committee for an outstanding job, and Cape Town is a beautiful city. New Zealand racing's on a journey at the moment and it's one of the key themes of the conference, and I'll talk a little bit about where we're heading, our challenges, the status of our government review, and some solutions we're working on for the future. I was privileged to be appointed the CEO of New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing in 2017, a place that has outstanding people in a country with an international reputation as a place to breed and develop the thoroughbred. We also have a very supportive racing minister in our Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, who wants to see the racing and breeding sectors of New Zealand racing flourish. But even with these advantages, racing's place on the New Zealand sporting landscape is under threat. And I believe racing administrators everywhere are being tested like never before. We are all being taken out of our comfort zone and facing challenges that we have not contemplated even 20 years ago. We need to find solutions, and quickly. Our situation in New Zealand is a microcosm of the issues facing the thoroughbred industry around the world, particularly in those countries in areas which lack the scale to insulate against winds of change. After decades of virtually uninterrupted access and growth, our business has been assailed by disruptors on all sides. The societal changes that have threatened our traditional support base are coinciding with digital and media disruptors that have put our wagering and business models under pressure. The average New Zealander is now comparatively time poor compared to earlier generations, who had the time and opportunity to indulge in their sporting interests, especially at weekends, which were mostly work-free zones. Racing is not suffering in isolations, as traditional sports like cricket, golf, bowls and even rugby are battling to sustain playing numbers and supporters. The millennials and post-millennials are more likely to take part in less structured recreational pursuits, which can be fitted around other commitments. In addition, urban dwellers have become unfamiliar with the rural lifestyle. There is no longer the connection between the general population and the horse, which existed a generation earlier. Changes in both the pattern and scale of pastoral farming have accelerated a decrease in owner trainers and owner breeders. These were typically farmers who kept a few broodmares and racehorses and were able to adjust their thoroughbreds at little cost. The owner breeder also played a key role in supporting trainers and stud farms in provincial areas. Sports betting, which was legalised in 1996, is now making a significant contribution to the New Zealand TAB. Racing, a sport which is built on tradition and family involvement, has not always been open to change, and many individuals and organisations have found it difficult to put the interests of the wider industry over their individual circumstances. However, we are hoping that our current circumstances will make it clear that the status quo is not an option. The New Zealand industry faces many challenges in our business. Foal numbers, prize money levels. Although we might have increased over the last 6 years our stake money at 20%, we are still providing insufficient returns for our owners and compare poorly with Australian states. We have ageing infrastructure. Lack of investment in the past has meant many of our major racecourses are struggling to produce suitable and consistent tracks and modern custom facilities. Large international wagering operators are luring local customers from New Zealand to offshore. A lack of scale has made it difficult for the New Zealand TAB to compete on pricing and service. And our social licence of integrity and welfare is becoming increasingly important, as we've heard throughout the conference. And that is ensuring maintaining an acceptable public profile. The lack of knowledge among those who oppose racing above the requirements for training and housing a purpose-bred 500 kilo plus thoroughbred can be frustrating, but it's a challenge we all accept. And importantly, capturing the hearts and minds of the next generation is paramount. In the last 2 years, New Zealand has advocated, last probably 4 years, thoroughbred racing has advocated strongly to the government for the need for change. And in 2018, the Racing Minister, Winston Peters, appointed John Massara, a recent recipient of the Longines and IFHA International Award of Merit, for his contribution to racing, to undertake a review of the New Zealand racing industry. And on your screen in front of you is an extract from the Minister's press release when that review was released, which stated the government commissioned Mr Massara to conduct an independent assessment of the state of the domestic racing industry and to make recommendations for change. Mr Massara's review delivers a blunt appraisal. He concludes the New Zealand racing industry is in a state of serious malaise and requires urgent reform. The review also warns thoroughbred racing is at a tipping point of irreparable damage. It confirms what many of us have been worried about for a number of years, and it highlights the need for the industry to turn itself around, the Minister said. Off the back of the Massara review, in the last 12 months, the government then appointed a transition agency to implement the 17 Massara recommendations. This reform package and proposed legislative changes has been delivered in 2 phases and will provide a step change and improvement and the next phase of development for the New Zealand thoroughbred racing industry. Phase 1 was delivered in July 2019 and provided legislation that will enable the 3 codes of racing to access new revenue streams in the areas of racefields fees, point of consumption charges and zero rating the wagering duty, which we talked about earlier in the government as a stakeholder session. Phase 2 is currently underway with a second piece of legislation going through the parliamentary process. Among the important changes included in this second bill are the new governance model for the TAB, the introduction of a statutory entity for integrity and a ministerial process to deal with surplus land assets when the code and club cannot agree a way forward. With the support of the government, New Zealand thoroughbred racing has a plan, and I'll run you through briefly the 6 main areas of development which will help New Zealand racing move to the next phase of its development. The first is, sorry, didn't hit that button. The first is building a longer-term commercial model to modernise the land assets that provides a future-proof structure for thoroughbred racing in New Zealand. New Zealand has 48 venues and we can't sustain 48 venues to the standard that punters and owners and to meet the standards of horse welfare for the future. So we've developed a plan that talks about clubs working together in regions, and we're very fortunate that we start to see some good discussion happen in the key markets of the Waikato region, and Waikato has a rich history of breeding and racing thoroughbreds. There's over 1,200 horses that are stabled. It's the biggest training track in Australasia, and we've got a place like Waipa Racing Club, Cambridge Racing Club and the Waikato Racing Club working together for the future and building out what a centre of excellence for racing and training can be in the future. And in the Auckland area, we have 3 key assets in Ellerslie, Auckland, Avondale and counties, all sitting on large pieces of land that need investment, and we're hoping in the not too distant future that we'll be able to deliver a new beginning for Auckland racing. As I said earlier, the potential is big. There's $1 billion worth of land assets. And we're very clear that every club has a role to play in the future. What we'd like to see is clubs working together in regions to the benefit of New Zealand thoroughbred racing in the future. And we have started that journey. We've seen the construction of New Zealand's first synthetic racetrack for racing and training at Cambridge. As I said before, the largest training centre in Australasia. And we're working with Polytrack, one of the exhibitors at the conference today. We're also working with Sport New Zealand to identify regions in New Zealand where sport and racing can work together to revitalise venues. The second area of focus will be growing engagement by working in multiple media and digital platforms with world-class expertise to expand exposure for the sport, both in New Zealand and in offshore markets like Australia and the rest of the world. In recent times, we've signed contracts with Sky TV that delivers pay TV coverage of New Zealand thoroughbred racing 7 days a week. We have an outstanding trackside which is a production company delivering content and live vision in high definition. We've partnered with New Zealand Media and Entertainment, who has multiple platforms and brands to improve form guide coverage and editorial coverage of New Zealand thoroughbred racing. Tabcorp, an important partner, is our key wagering partner in Australia, developing wagering vision opportunities in Australia, both in Australia and international markets. And other important commercial and wagering deals have been struck in recent times with Sportsbet, Betfair and Ladbrokes. Utilising social media, where our Love Racing brand, Love Racing is a new customer brand that NZTR have developed for use by our clubs, and we will be sharing that on a new digital platform over the next 12 months. The third area of development is improving our training and education outcomes for all of our participants. Importantly, we're within a couple of months of finalising a partnership agreement with Massey University, a world-renowned education facility that will have accredited pathway programs for track riders, stable hands and trainers, and also an elite training program for apprentices to train and develop as elite athletes. And we also want to work with Massey to improve the development of our existing licence holders with standards and professional development. The fourth area is providing our club network with the support. We have 64 clubs in New Zealand that support the need for improved outcomes in attendance, community engagement and track and venue infrastructure. We'll roll out a new digital presence for all thoroughbred clubs, provide toolkits and guidelines for venues and tracks, an industry and owned event logistics business to service key events. And what the clubs are doing magnificently well is engaging with various community groups, and we want to add value to what they do. And partnering with the clubs is a key component of future growth in New Zealand racing. The fifth area is partnering with government and our participants to deliver a step change for racing and continue to improve our social licence in the community in the areas of equine welfare and integrity. The sixth, and probably the most important, is of all the Masara recommendations, and there's 17 of them, we need to find a partner, an international wagering partner, because you don't have the scale or the balance sheet to invest in the technology that customers are used to across the world. So if we don't move to a joint venture with an international wagering operator, we're not going to get the step change we're looking for. And really, of the developments that I've talked about today, 1 and 6 I call game changers. If we can get the right international wagering partner and get our assets commercialised, working in the right direction for New Zealand thoroughbred racing, we'll see improved prize money, improved outcomes for our participants, and ultimately drive better wagering outcomes for New Zealand racing. In all these journeys, I always sit back and say, what have I learned? And I'd have to say there's 5 things that I've learned as a management team and as a board. The government, understanding and bringing the government along on your business and getting the government to understand what you're trying to achieve is vitally important. You never give up on pursuing change. You bring stakeholders with you. And as a regulator, New Zealand thoroughbred racing cannot do these things on their own. Everyone in New Zealand racing has a role to play. And not only does the government today important, but it's also important to make sure you get cross-party support within government is vital. So what we're doing, we've got a three-year plan, and what's on the screen today, in how do we measure the success of the things we're going to do over the next 3 years. And we'll be looking to increase returns to owners to greater than 40%. We're looking to increase the number of owners by 10%, increase our active monthly website users to over 100,000, and grow attendance at our top 20 community and showcase events by 15%. Can I take this opportunity to say thank you for allowing me to present today? Now I'll finish with a short video, but before I do that, we sometimes lose perspective on the fun and enjoyment racing has and continue to deliver to worldwide communities. So all I say to you, keep smiling. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.